today we're talking about fatherhood. Khalil, this topic of fatherhood for both you and I is such an incredibly powerful topic. I remember the story when I was a young father and my kids were sort of 9 and 6, and we were moving city, and my kids moved and my wife moved ahead of me. I had to stay behind and sort something out. And we were moving to a coastal town, beautiful place. And I remember phoning my family and chatting to them. And I chatted to my daughter, who was 6 years old, and I said to her, Blythe, isn't life beautiful there? And these were her words to me. She said, if this was my life, I would scream.
Wow.
And I said, why? She said, Daddy, because you're not here. And it just made me realize just the extent to which us as fathers need to be there for our kids and the impact that we have on when we are there. I mean, you have an amazing story from your time.
I think having spent 20 years in prison and being a missing in action father, one of the earliest memories I have is being in prison, in fact, getting a call from the chaplain and it being from my son. And he actually said, Daddy, where are you? And my conversation with him was to try to redirect. And then he says, no, Daddy, where are you? And I told him prison, and I remember he didn't grasp it. He couldn't comprehend what prison was and why I was absent. And finally, we got to a point where he says, when are you coming home? And I couldn't answer that question either. And I remember him throwing down the phone and just screaming in the background. That scream I'll never forget. Being a missing in action father makes me appreciate the fact that you were there. And it's that kind of being present, being there for the child that today makes me appreciative of the fact that I am their hero.
That's a wonderful story. I mean, the story of how you were a missing in action dad, you were behind bars and unable to father them, but right now, as you stand, they both view you as their hero. And for me, that's just an incredible story of redemption and grace and the power of choice in your life to turn things around and to be back into their lives.
What I'm really grateful for, Craig, is that we can have this kind of conversation as men and come clean about the choices that we've made that didn't necessarily benefit our children and came out of places of very kind of limited views of what manhood meant, distorted views even about what fatherhood is. And so having these conversations, they're the conversations that we need to have as men, wherever we are, whatever it is that we're doing, whatever our titles. Let's just unpack the titles and say,
Absolutely.
This is about fatherhood.
Yep.
This is about our children. This is about the kind of men we want to become.
Now, you know, Kelly, what I realize is we father out of who we are as men. And if who we are as men is not quite right, what we're going to impart to our kids is not going to be the right stuff. So I father my son out of who I am as a man. I father my daughter out of who I am as a man. So there's a responsibility on us as men to be the kind of man we want our sons to become and the kind of man we want our daughters to marry one day. And that's a challenge. That's a big challenge.
You say that, and I think of my youngest daughter, Sage, and how, as a father, I didn't, even with 2 sons, there were many things I took for granted. For example, with my boys, I kind of gave them license to become whoever they might imagine they would be. With my daughter, I'm much more circumspect. I'm much more careful about the choices she makes. And as a man who wasn't the best example of what manhood is, being a father, I'm much more conscious of the fact that how I treat her, the way that I speak to her, how I interact with her, is shaping what she expects in a man. And so I'm much more careful. I'm much more, even beyond careful, I'm much more thoughtful.
Conscious.
Yes, I'm conscious and I'm mindful.
Right.
I'm mindful that what I do, what I say, the way that I say it and do it is impacting her.
It has an impact.
Absolutely.
You know, someone once said that you will be your son's first hero and your daughter's first romance. And isn't that a touching thing? When my daughter was 3 years old, she went in for a heart operation. And it wasn't open heart surgery, it was modern technology through a catheter in the vein. But I asked the doctor if I could just go into the theatre and hold her in my arms as she went under anesthetic. And then if I could be around when she came around. And the operation was a great success, and we went home, and A month later, we were at my house and we were having this gathering. And I had a group of friends around, and my daughter was standing next to me. And my one friend said to her, Blythe, I believe you were in hospital recently. And she looked up at him with an innocent face and she said, yes. She said, my heart was broken. She said, but my daddy fixed it. I had to leave the gathering. I mean, I realized then she saw me as this man who did fix her heart. In her mind, I fixed her heart. I was this man who could do anything. And I had to ask myself the question, am I that man? What does she want of me as a man, and can I be that? And I realized I've got a journey to go. I've got to develop myself as a man to become whole, as I raise her to become a whole woman.
And you saying that brings an experience back to me around my daughter Sage, and how we had gone out to eat one evening, and the restaurant we went to had a roped off entrance point. And as we entered, as little children do, she went the opposite direction of the roped off entrance. I was a bit irritated, but I was trying to direct her, and she wasn't paying attention because she was just so happy that we were going to dinner together and having fun and doing all the normal things that families do. And I said to her, in a tone that I was not quite conscious of, Sage, you must go around the opposite direction to get into the entrance. And while she was doing it, she started crying. And I couldn't understand why she was crying. And so I said, so Sage, why are you crying? She said, Daddy, it's the way you said it. I didn't know I was doing anything wrong.
She was so sensitive to your tone.
Even the tone that I used with her was important. And in that split second of irritation, she was able to pick it up.
Right.
At such a deep emotional level.
She burst into tears.
That she burst into tears. It made me reflect on how I even speak to my daughter. How, as a father, that something as simple for me as my tone and my demeanor actually impacts the way that my daughter learns to interact with men.
As fathers, we matter incredibly. We are our son's first heroes, our daughter's first romance. And how we live our lives has a massive impact on them. We are the most important men in their lives.
And if we don't know that, what happens is oftentimes we make terrible, terrible choices, and the outcomes of those choices are lifelong. What I hope that most men who are fathers get from this discussion is that what you say matters, what you do matters. Be the man that becomes the father who's not just father of a daughter or father of a son, but father of a nation.